if we're going to talk about Rings of Power, we really can only talk about the first episode because I've only got through the first episode so far.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about the first episode. What are your thoughts, Mason?
My thoughts are more or less what I was afraid they would be. I so funny, man. I'm just sort of indifferent. Like it was all right. Like there were parts I thought were all right. There were parts that I was like, I'm not sure about that. It was just sort of middle of the road for me. It didn't knock my socks off. I didn't hate it. It's just all right, and I'll carry on watching it.
Yeah. It was
Okay.
aggressively mediocre.
Aggressive. I would actually say low tier media. Like it just barely managed to slide it. It's low middle tier. It's like, man, this just barely evaded total shit. But so some things I want to point out about the Rings of Power. There's some pet peeves I have with it. So Mason, you're a writer, but I don't. Have you ever done any like stage acting or any kind of film production? Yeah. You said you were. No. Was it music production you went for?
Yeah, I briefly went for like music production, like a recording engineer, that sort of thing. But I've not really ever done any. Other than like school plays. I think I've mentioned before that I've played both Jesus's prosecution and his defense.
Okay.
And also a lawyer that wasn't actually a lawyer and was just a window cleaner. And was hired under the false impression that he was a lawyer.
Okay. So there has been some stage acting. Okay. So I've done just enough, and by just enough I mean an absolute iota of Hollywood shenanigans to know kind of what goes on behind the scenes, what goes into things, and that kind of stuff. And I've also done a little bit of homework to have a better understanding of it. And from a directing and screenwriting standpoint, the show sucks shit. There were directing choices that made no fucking sense. There is inconsistency with world building from the script, and all of it just makes the whole thing. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? This is what many hundreds of what is it, like $1 billion went into this thing, Kate?
Yeah, I think $1 billion plus.
$1 billion fucking gets me. So the first thing that I want to talk about, Mason, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, right out the gate, they fucking have this fucking scene where the elves are in this ruin, and it's in a very cold atmosphere, climate, and one of them encounters a cave troll, and he runs from the cave troll, and then he runs down a long corridor, and he throws his torch back so he can see the troll coming, and then visible to the audience, there's enough light in this corridor to see the troll first walk away, and then walk back into the corridor and hurl a massive boulder of ice. And the superhuman elves, mind you, I could see this on camera. The torch is in the corridor, down by where the fucking troll is. So the audience, our human audience, can see this fucking troll. And the superhuman elves, with their superhuman perception and superhuman agility and godlike combat prowess, stand there and wait to be crushed by this giant block of ice.
Yeah, it's like suddenly out of nowhere, they lose all of their superhuman abilities. And there's plenty of space for them to have jumped out of the way.
Literally.
Or to have killed the thing.
No, I would have been like, hey, Felindor, you see that ice coming towards us? Yeah, Brondor, I do. We should probably
move.
Man. Fucking trolls. He really thought that would work? Yeah, he really thought... Well, he's a troll. It was his best attempt. Right, let's go kill it. Yeah, that's how that should have gone down.
I was like, quick, stick a wand up its nose. It's not a troll in the dungeon.
So apparently, what we can conclude from this is, of course, that ice is elf kryptonite.
Yes.
Well, and listen,
Yeah.
I love the elves, right? But
Yeah.
I think it just comes down to diving out of the way would have been way too interesting for them, and as we all know, the elves are fucking boring people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they, they did that, and then they proceeded to, have the thing get into the larger part of the cave. And Galadriel, who miraculously doesn't have any psychic powers for some reason, even though she's descendant of Maiar and has psychic abilities, didn't sense that the troll was there beforehand. Suddenly walks in there. They all stand around, okay, like they're staging this. And the Throndor guy, like, side raises her off of his sword to go and stab it, like, in the bottom of its face.
Yeah,
And you skipped the whole part there. This is he threw her with the side raise throw
Yeah.
after the troll had been amongst the group of elves, absolutely wrecking their shit.
Yeah. And but it was just so crazy though, because they all stopped. The dude lets his sword down, like, okay, step up here, like it was planned.
Exactly.
yeah, it's a bit choreographed. Yeah, I get you on that one.
Yep.
For me, right? So, starting with the stuff that I thought was all right, I didn't particularly mind the opening. I thought it was like the very opening was kind of an attempt to give us that same sort of feeling you get from Fellowship of the Ring, where they're like, here's all the epic stuff that happened before this story, and they're like, oh, here's the wall of the, like, with the elves against Morgoth, and this, like, Sauron's quick backstory, and I enjoyed it a bit, but I don't think it quite achieved like the level of epic that I think it was going for.
No.
Then I quite enjoyed like the theme of like showing us like the peaceful times before all that happened, like, the elves in their young days and all that sort of stuff. But I think when it came to the elves, I think that those scenes had the lowest energy, especially once we got past that Tomb Raider opening. Because after that, it was just all elves like speaking to each other. I really liked. And I actually really liked this bit. I loved the bit with the Harfoots, where they were like, the hunters were coming through and they were all like hidden away and all secret until like the hunters are gone, and then they like came back out and they were like just went about their business and started gathering food.
Yeah, that was good.
I actually thought, to me, I was like, that feels very Hobbit, like the way that I've always understood hobbits, like, oh, big people are here, right, hide. And like that to me just felt, I was like, yeah, okay, I really liked that. And I quite liked Nori's character in general. I like that she's like almost she's the Sam of the show. She's the hobbit that's got this adventurous spirit and wants to know what's going on in the far-reaching world. And
that's not Sam. That's not Sam. Sam was the stay-at-home gardener. I just want to be left alone and tend to my veggies.
Yeah.
Not really. I mean it from the standpoint of Sam was very fascinated by the elves.
Okay.
Like in the books, and it was a bit in the movies, but in the books he was very, very enamored and fascinated by the elves. And although he was the stay-at-home sort of guy, he did like hearing about stuff that was going on outside of it.
See, I think when I think of Nori and like comparing her to like some of the hobbits from the Fellowship, I would more so equate her to like
Merry and Pippin.
Took.
Yeah. That is actually a really decent point. I thought of it as Sam just because of the thing about the elves, but yeah, you're right. It's a much more of a Tookish sort of vibe. But I enjoyed that, and I did like that little scene too of Nori talking to her mum and being like, "Don't you want to know what's going on in the outer world?" And her mum just being like, "Nah, not really. I'll go help your dad."
Yeah,
that's not really. We don't fuck with that. That's just not something we do.
And I liked seeing the stuff in the Southlands just because from a standpoint of like, right, okay, this is the bit that I was like quite interested in. It's, you know, it's all going on down in the lands that will become Mordor, and it's where all the darkness is going to be happening, and it's a part of Middle Earth that we haven't really explored much. So I enjoyed seeing that, and it made me laugh that it was like it made me laugh that it was like, here's our introduction of the Half-Foots. They're all in their little fields, and they're hiding from the big people. And here's the elves, and they're dealing with these big important matters. And here's the men, and they're in the local tavern.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed that. It was an interesting little bit of world building to see that the elves had been stationed there pretty much against the locals' wishes. You know, like keeping an eye on them because they don't trust them because they're the descendants of people that fought Morgoth.
Mm-hmm.
Even more interesting to me from the standpoint of we know that they're also the people that will help Sauron. So it's like, yeah, but you're kind of not helping with that, guys, because you being stationed there is pissing them off so much that they're more likely to help Sauron just to fuck with you anyway. I also think that the casting of Elrond was pretty good, just from the standpoint of that dude. Soon as we got to the bit where he's writing down that speech that the king will make, I knew that was Elrond, just from the voice, you know, just from the cadence and the intonation that he was using. I turned to Lynn, I was like, that's going to be Elrond, and it was. So for me, that must have been good casting for me to be able to tell with no hint from the show or the audio description. Like, yeah, okay, that's Elrond.
So
Fair point.
They
So far, what, Kate?
I'm just saying they totally got it wrong, though, in the sense that Gil-galad was not Elrond's father. He was not.
I mustn't have been paying attention.
His father was human.
Yeah, I do know that. I didn't even notice that they'd made Gil-galad his father.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yep.
I didn't even notice that he talked to his father at all.
Yeah.
If I see me and Kate watched both episodes last night, and she didn't pick that up. I did. I might have been mistaken. So it'll have to be. I'll have to look it up to be sure. I could be wrong. We could all be wrong about this right now, but I'm pretty sure they mentioned that the King of the Elves was Elrond's dad. And if that's what they said, that's not how it was in the books.
Yeah, because they said the High King was Gil-galad, and that, you know.
Yeah, right. Well, if they've done that, that is a needless addition to the canon that like directly contradicts it.
Plus, Galadriel was Elrond's mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Not her. Yeah. And there's something else that merits. Oh, fuck! I just lost it. I just lost it.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
In terms of things that I wasn't that much for, there were a few lines of dialogue where I was like,
the thing was actually dialogue. I just remembered. So something else that they did, and this is again from a directing and screenwriting perspective, there was that line that was spoken to Elrond. The council has revoked your right to be at the next meeting, and that's just it. There's no payoff to that. There's no further explanation of why he was denied presence there. It's just that's a dead line, and that's too interesting. That's too important of a thing to just be a dead line. It either needed to be explained or expounded upon later, or cut out. But it's just there.
Yeah.
Well, the line that made me burst out laughing was actually back in the opening when they were in that bloody snow cave or whatever, the ice cave, and when Galadriel was like, "This place is so evil. Even our torches don't give off warmth." I was just like, okay.
Right, yeah, that and the fact that they completely were just like, okay, we're going to borrow off of all the dialogue from the Mines of Moria section in the first movie.
I didn't notice that, to be fair. But
what is this devilry? And basically that entire explanation of them getting into stuff that they didn't understand and, inviting the darkness and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh, shit.
Now, I hate to do this, but I have to play devil's advocate here. I actually didn't mind the line. I had an immediate visceral reaction to it because the rest of the show isn't coming up to the level to actually support that line. But in isolation, the line itself fits very well within the world because the symbolism there, the torch, it's obviously a source of light and heat, which sustains life, especially in the context it's in. And so the torch is a source of good and necessity, and the evil of the place suppressing that aspect of the torch's existence. That fits into the world. The symbolism there is completely streamlined and 100% it works. The line is good. It's the fact that the show does not rise to meet that level of seriousness that line fell flat.
I think the context of the line is good. I don't necessarily think the phrasing or the delivery of it was. It's weird because I'm like falling more on the side of like not thinking it was great, but I really was in the middle. I'm looking forward to. Oh, actually, you want to know the stupidest thing of all?
What?
This is gonna make you rage so hard. I just know it. So the audio description, right, describes the landscape, people's body language, the lighting, and how it works. They describe the scenery that's around. It does not, however, read the fucking subtitles when they're talking in Elvish together. Now, one of the reasons audio description works so goddamn well when you're watching a show like, I don't know, Breaking Bad, is because there's lots of Spanish in that show. And guess what? The audio description reads it for you.
Yes.
Amazon got so close, man. I was so happy. Like, audio description, yeah. And it, for the most part, it does work well. And I was glad it was there because Lee didn't have to tell me everything. But the fact that it doesn't read out the subtitles, I was like, that is so utterly stupid. There are going to be important lines in that show that are delivered in Elvish. There are going to be absolutely vital lines in that show that will be delivered in Elvish. And I'm not going to know what they are without someone watching it with me.
Right. Now, well, I don't have anything to add to that. That's just great.
I was going to be.
It is.
I was going to be slightly petty and be like, well, you're not going to miss much.
Yeah, well, that's just your personal opinion. But, yeah, I mean, that's really not the point.
It's not. I do want to, unless you want to continue expounding on that, Mason, I do want to move to another point I have here about why I think the showrunner and the people who are in charge of set and costume and the director, all of these people are not actually doing their fucking job, or they're just very bad at their jobs. So I don't know how good the audio description for the opening scene was, Mason, but the opening scene where it shows the great battle between the Elven armies and the armies of Morgoth, the Elvish soldiers are wearing Elven armor. That's very beautiful. It's very ornate armor, functional, but it looks Elvish. Then we fast forward in the show, and we're in this ceremony where we're celebrating these Elvish heroes who have supposedly accomplished this great thing. They've secured the end of the war. They've established that peace is upon us and we can finally breathe easy. And they are wearing the most bland tinfoil looking armor I've ever fucking seen. It looked like it was made out of tinfoil and polished with boot polish. It looked like shit. What the fuck were they thinking, making the armor that the elves wore into battle so ornate and beautiful, and making the ceremonial armor look like it was put together by a cosplayer on a tight budget?
Wow. We have prodigious And
Hello,
Dr. Feel
gamers.
Good.
Welcome in, Kate. If you can't, yeah, thank you. You shouted him out. Everyone, Prodigious is part of the Meat Sweat Boys. He's pretty chill. Go check out his stream. He's pretty fun. Dr. Feel Good, how's it going today, man? Good to see you. We're talking about the Rings of Power. Me and Kate have seen the first 2 episodes. Mason has only seen the first episode, so me and Kate are trying to avoid any spoilers from episode 2.
Prodigious, you are awesome.
Kate.
Dr. Feel Good, you are awesome.
They used Costco tinfoil for the armor.
Yeah, it's one of the problems with watching it as a blind fan is that I don't know, it's weird. I feel like when I first lost my sight, I imagined things a lot more than I do now, whereas in a weird way in my head, it's all I don't know if I could. It's kind of ineffable, right? But it's a lot more either cartoony or text based in my head now. Like it's a lot more impressionistic than it was at the beginning, where those first few years, it was like it was giving me like stand-ins. Like is a random person that you're imagining, and you're actually sort of picturing how the scene is. Whereas in now, I feel like I envision things a lot more in the way that you do when you when you're like reading a book. So obviously it leaves my imagination to fill in a lot of the blanks with that sort of stuff. So
yeah. And the other thing that I think needs to be tackled here is the dialogue. I know we've talked about that somewhat, but especially in the first part with, Finrod, her brother, and all of that stuff in the opening, and that totally BS
Yeah,
thing
that's
about the rock. I was like, okay, so what did you like, did you drink like 10 shots of espresso and watch every epic Disney movie speech ever before you sat down and wrote this?
The speech about the rock and the boat was so pseudo intellectual,
yeah,
so pseudo spiritual, so contrived. I was like, really?
Yeah.
$1 billion and this is the best you got? I could literally get plastered off my ass, slam my head into a brick wall 3 times, and throw up, and my vomit would land in a better sentence than that entire spiel about the rock and the boat. Give me the rock. It doesn't float because it can only see down. Are you fucking kidding me? First of all, you fucking idiot, based upon the magical precedents we see in your fucking world, we know that the land has a life of its own. That's why Tom Bombadil fucking exists. The earth is somewhat sentient and aware, so you're full of shit. The rock is very aware of what's going on around it because we are in a hyper fantasy setting, so you're an idiot, and as an elf you would know that, so the writing of this show is garbage. Second of all, the metaphor about the boat doesn't fucking work because the boat is only an extension of the people who built it and use it. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, just from a thingy standpoint, though, it kind of works from like the snobby elf perspective of like dwarves are like dwarves are the rock people, like the elves don't give a shit about it. A rock doesn't grow, so it's just inherently evil and only knows the darkness,
Okay, that's a fair point. That's a fair point, but the elves still have an innate understanding of magic. I want to point out really quick. I want to point out, we just got, so Anna Kasparian is a commentator from the Young Turks, and we just got someone who commented with that screen name. I quit my job to make Biden's unemployment numbers look worse. And I love that comment so much. Anna, we're talking about the Rings of Power right now, but everything prior to this was pretty much, well, not everything, almost all of it before this was political shit. So if you want, you go watch the VOD or go to the IYFA and Adventurous Publications YouTube channels, and all of it's going to be clipped up on those 2 channels. Yeah. Welcome in. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the adventure.
Anna, you are awesome. But yeah, this is why I think this is why I struggle as like a reviewer and in like the booktube space thing, because like I live in this world of extremes, man. People like they either love something or they fucking hate it. And I'm just like here as this like casual fence sitter where I'm like, I come out of a show like Rings of Power and I'm like, yeah, it was all right. That doesn't
Right.
make good content. You know what I mean? I can't make a video about Rings of Power and be like, it was all right.
Well, I mean, and that's
I actually, well, hang on, Kate. I actually have to disagree with you, Mason, and here's why. Here's when you watch a piece of content and it's mediocre, and that's your final impression. The way you still make compelling content about it is what we're doing right now. We zone in on things we really liked, we zone in on things we really hated, and then at the end we give our final analysis because it didn't have a consistent quality and because there were these things that really sucked. It's only low mediocre. That's how you do that, man.
Yeah.
The music was like, I'd say I had a quick listen to the soundtrack this morning while I was getting ready, and like I'm sort of again, I feel like it's all right. Like I'm halfway there, but there are certain themes, especially in like the main title theme. There are like little bits where I'm like, oh, that feels a little bit more Harry Potter than Lord of the Rings. Like
Yeah.
there are certain note progressions that they use that feel like they're gonna start going into like a Harry Potter sort of thing.
Mhm.
But for the most part, it seemed all right. I can't say I noticed it too much because obviously audio, like music, tends to play when people aren't talking, which is when audio description is speaking for the most part.
Right.
So I can't say I noticed it too much. Like I say, I really did like everything when it comes to the Half-Foots, and I know how people feel about hobbits being involved in this show. And
Mhm.
as proto hobbits and not actual hobbits, I don't mind. My one thing is that like don't get them involved in major world events. Like if
Right.
they're there as sort of like the audience stand-in of like they're there to be like, wow, this big thing is happening and this is sort of how it affects us, but we're not getting involved in the main thing. I
Yeah.
don't think I'll mind that, and I think that I enjoyed the characterization of the
Yeah.
Half-Foots.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as they stay off on the side as like an audience proxy, I think that would be good. And in the sense like I liked, the little old shaman man and the fact that it was really a callback to the fact that hobbits were Tolkien's representation of, Scottish or Welsh people.
Yeah.
Um and So, I mean, I liked that fact and the fact that, they were the Harfoots or, more like the Brandy Books and the Tooks in the sense that they were like wildling kind of
Yeah.
creatures as opposed to the more affluent
Yeah,
ones
like
like and
hobbits are more upper class.
yeah,
They like
yeah,
settle down in their nice little community and they drink tea and
yeah,
yeah, where you got the Tooks and the Brandy Books that live on like the outskirts of the Shire and they're like,
yes,
well, we're kind of hobbits, but we like the outside world too. Yeah, yeah.
right, yeah. Because I mean, I liked that callback, because we didn't necessarily get to see a lot of that in the original Lord of the Rings, but um man, there was so much they could have done though to make it more interesting, I think.
Well,
Especially
they do have time.
yeah.
They do
Yeah.
have time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because some of it was, ham-handed in the way that they're trying so hard to land that epic impact without any kind of setup to
Yeah.
Right.
begin with.
They are definitely rushing shit along. They are definitely rushing. And for me, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go. You go.
Okay. For me, it's a combination of factors. It really is a combination of so many different things. Bad writing here, bad set or costume choices here, stiff acting here. We haven't even gotten to the black elf dude yet. It's like, dude,
They could have actually.
if you're gonna put a stoic on screen, okay, there has to be something about him that makes him more than just a cardboard cutout of the stoic character. We need something that first of all, you could give him something in his backstory and have it come to light very soon within introducing the character that explains why he's so cardboard cutout. If we don't get that, then there has to be we have to see something more human in the character, or we're not going to identify with him. That guy, I don't give a fuck if that guy lives or dies, because he's just the stoic elf dude. There's nothing about him that's identifiable. And the other thing is, and I know Mason doesn't care about this, but I sure as hell do, because I hate it when people fuck with the original work. Elves aren't black.
Yeah.
They're not. It's a fucking diverse. Hang on, Mason. I'm going to get to a point here. Just hang on. Elves aren't fucking black. It's diversity casting. But if you wanted a black elf, me and Caitlin came up with this last night because we were talking about ways you could fix this whole clusterfuck. If you wanted a black elf, you know what you could have done? You could have said, this guy's mom or this guy's dad was a black human. And then you would have had some very interesting internal conflict with the character. His existence would have been congruent with the mechanics of the world. And it would have explained why he was such a stoic, because his whole life he would have been ostracized from both groups and had all this conflict circling around his very existence. And it would have explained why he was such a stoic, unenthusiastic personality. But no, we didn't get any of that. We're just supposed to take the black elf at face value.
Yeah, because he would have been taken in by the elves, because if his mother had been an elf, basically they have this whole unwritten code of how they are supposed to take care of their own. So
they'd get the choice, wouldn't they? Because is that not what happened with Elrond and Elros?
Well, yeah, because that's why Elrond ended up being taken in, and all of that was
because he chose to be an elf and his brother chose to be a human.
Right. Yeah, and so whichever side he had decided to go with would have been, the one that he would have had to live in. However, he would have still had to deal with all the social had to deal with all the social ramifications of, them still seeing him as somewhat outside.
Here's the interesting thing, right? This is an inherently visual problem, right? Because I purposely told Lee not to tell me which one the black characters were. So I actually have no idea which character you're talking about.
Are you sure you don't? Because there's only one stoic, I'm a cardboard cutout of a stoic character.
Well, yeah, I can guess from what you're saying. Yes, I can guess from what you're saying, because in my opinion there was a less interesting elf. But my point is, I don't think the problem is with them being black. I think the problem is with them not being given that much characterization yet, or at all, if they're going to give them any at all. Because I wouldn't even know until you confirmed to me that is the black one. I had no idea. And as for any of the other black characters, I don't know who is white, who is anything else. So I think I have the benefit of not needing to see that and not having that be an issue for me.
Yeah. I want to be absolutely crystal clear. I don't care that the character is black per se. I care that Tolkien expressly stated the elves are a fair-skinned race, and they shoehorned in a black elf because diversity. That's my problem. They changed the work of the original creator to make it fit modern sensibilities, and that disgusts me. You don't fuck with the master's work to make it fit the time. That's not what good storytelling is about.
And
you go, Kate. You go first.
And the fact that they also did it in a way where they obviously made it token, obviously made it a token character, because they didn't skimp on the opportunity to slip in the message in that whole conversation with that confrontation he had with the teenage boy in the tavern.
Right. It just so happens
Out
that
of
the
nowhere.
teenage boy lashes out and picks a fight with the black elf and calls him the other. And there's a whole thing about oppression and conflict with the one black elf that we see in the whole show. And it just so happened to be that elf when his white partner was 300 feet away waiting. Like, it's so obvious what they were doing there. And it's like, give it a fucking rest.
I mean, I do think that character has got a problem with elves in general. He does refer to them as knife ears and pointies throughout the. So I think there's definitely I actually yes, okay. Now that you point it out, it's probably a case of that thing that I mentioned earlier of not helping your own cause. When you know people are going to be complaining about this whole diversity casting issue, people are going to be complaining about that, so maybe don't give that line to the you're just stoking the fires, basically.
Right.
Is my point. But the thing is, from a storytelling perspective, I actually quite like this. I like this approach of like the elves of they've always been the snooty ones of Middle Earth. Like, as much as I like elves, they are like, yes, look at us, we're elves, we're so much better than you, we were here first, we're Iluvatar's children. And like the fact that they are keeping watch over this land against many of the inhabitants' wishes. They're keeping watch on this land because they're like, you helped Morgoth and we don't trust you. And from that guy's perspective, that was 1,000 years ago. That was like our ancestors. And then you look at it from the elves' point of view, and it's like, yes, but with our long lives, we remember that happened in our lifetime. And like, from a storytelling perspective, I think that's a fairly interesting angle of like this bitterness between man and elf because the elves are acting superior. But yes, I agree that they probably stoked the fires by having him direct that sentiment directly at the black elf.
Because it's like, and it's like I said, it was obviously a token segment, because it was like, okay, you did this ham-handed on purpose because you wanted it to stick out like a sore thumb because you wanted the brownie points. No.
It is a virtue signal. And I'll tell you how they could have fixed it. They could have, first of all, established that lore about that black elf, where one of his parents was a black human. That would have gone a long ways towards saving it by itself. Then they could have been a little bit self-aware and tongue-in-cheek with the scene, and the kid throwing the fit could have been like, and it's just so fitting that the only elf who's willing to come and talk to us is the black one, ostracized from your own people because you're the only one who's different and you're the only one who comes and polices us. Like, they could, if there'd been some self-awareness and there'd been a thing about that, how these humans were so pathetic and low that the only elf that was designated to come check on them was the one that's different from all the other elves. That could have been some self-awareness, and that could have been it would have enhanced the whole point that the scene was supposed to make in the context of just the show, outside of real world politics. And it would have kind of saved it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
See, I would have avoided it completely, and I would have probably just had something. 1 second, shifting position. I probably would have had something along the lines of maybe like a small confrontation with a gang of the men and a gang of the elves, and sort of like as they try to go into a town to check on it, have them be like, no, you're not coming in. We're not having this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And we won't take this surveillance or whatever the old word for surveillance would have been. Well, we're not having you just keeping tabs on us forever.
Right. And that would have been better. I agree. That's a solution I didn't even think of. That's just better.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And also, I think this all could have also been saved with there being actual setup of them letting people know, hey, this group of people for those of you on the outside of this who've maybe, maybe are just being introduced to Middle Earth and all of this stuff, these were people that helped Morgoth and all of that stuff. And that's why they're in the straits that they're in. And that's why they're being, watched over and all of this stuff. But there was no setup for that. It was,
I mean, it did mention it, but only in passing. So yes,
right, exactly. Like there wasn't any development. And that's another thing that's really bad about like with this show and how lazy it is, because part of the reason why they're so just co-opting so many things is a trend that has been happening with the whole paint by numbers thing. They're like, okay, if we just take a whole series that someone else did, we can just take names of characters that people already know so that we don't have to do any development of our own, because we can just people can automatically assume that they already know everything about these characters. So we don't have to actually do any setup. We can just throw it together and there you go.
I mean, unfortunately, they are working with very limited source material because, I mean, in a way, the Tolkien estate sort of shot us. You what? Sorry.
I said, not if they would just read.
Well, yeah, because this is what I'm saying. The Tolkien estate technically shot the fans in the foot with this because it's not the Silmarillion that they've got the rights to. Which, if they did, they would have a lot more to work with in terms of the Second Age. All they've actually got the rights to. So what they've got to work within is what Tolkien gave us in the appendices, which is very limited information.
I would disagree with you. I disagree with your statement out of hand, Mason. It's not unfortunate. It's an opportunity. Yeah. They have the bare bones of a setting and a world that they can put literally any story they want in. They could have created a whole new cast of characters. Yeah. They could have created a completely 100% unique storyline. And the beautiful thing about it is they could have made it a storyline like Rogue One, where this storyline that was previously completely unknown ties into the greater story in some really interesting way. This provides background information to a key event in the greater story, and the story, was previously completely untold. Or it could have been just a story that happened in Middle Earth and had no real greater significance to any part of the greater happenings of Middle Earth and the other stories. It's just a cool story that happened in this setting. They could have done either one.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. It could have been much better. Actually, now we're speaking about, was it Erondia was his name, I think, wasn't it, that character?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He delivered the other line that made me laugh, which was the woman being like, just say what you've come to say. And he's like, I've said it in every way other than words. Well, why don't you try words then, Erondia? There are words for I love you. In fact, there are 3 of them. And if you want, you can just shorten that to love you, and it could be 2 words. So why don't you just try words?
Yeah, it's like I get you were trying to be dramatic and romantic and all of that stuff, but you guys didn't build up enough story credibility credit.
It was a payoff moment without any build-up.
Yeah, yes. If he'd done that in 5 episodes' time, where he's clearly demonstrated through his actions that he loves this woman,
right?
And then he delivered that line later on. Yeah, 100%. That's like a no, you too sort of line. Right. But right at the beginning of the show, it's like, well, try words then.
Right. But this
Imagine if she'd have just done that, like the character. Why don't you try words then, Erondia?
But this is indicative of a problem that's running rampant through Hollywood right now. There's no patience. So look at what happened with the DC cinematic universe. They saw the success of the Marvel cinematic universe, and they tried to rush through their own. What they tried to do, what Marvel did with Endgame, and it took all those Marvel movies to set up, 10, 12 Marvel movies, and DC tried to set up an Endgame style movie with 3 movies. It's like you're rushing things. You're just trying to get to the big payoff, and these modern Hollywood writers have no understanding that a payoff is meaningless without all the buildup. You can't skip to the good part. It's why to go completely outside of the discussion of storytelling and use a metaphor from another aspect of life, it's like sex. If you just skip to the PNV and then blow your wad in like a minute, it's so much less satisfying than taking your time with it and actually savoring your partner. It's like a good meal. It's the difference between throwing a fucking TV dinner in a microwave and having something that's like edible in 3 minutes, and actually taking the time to hand make all your ingredients and then mix them all together and do a proper stir fry and a proper flatbread and have a proper meal. It's like there's no comparison. Yeah. And Hollywood has completely lost the understanding of that. It's the same issue in She-Hulk. They constantly set up something, and then it's something that would need to be continuously built for like the next 3 episodes, but they set it up and they pay it off in the next scene. It's like you fucking idiots have no idea how to build tension or meaning or significance, because you always rush for the payoff. You're like a bunch of dopamine junkies desperate for your next fucking hit. It's pathetic.
Or they don't, because obviously I've only seen the first episode, so I don't know whether this is going to come back into it yet. But I was like, right, so what's going to happen with that wolf then? Because you've like, right, you made a big deal out of showing that wolf being around and like sniffing the air and stuff. And I was expecting like, I was expecting the wolf to follow Nori home and like attack the hobbits, and it was going to be a like, see Nori, you shouldn't have gone where we told you not to go.
Yeah.
But the wolf didn't come back at all, and I was like, so why bother showing us the wolf then?
Right. Yeah.
Does it come back, or is that like, because either it comes back. There are 3 options here. Either it was a setup with no payoff and it never comes back. It comes back in like episode 2 or something. Because if it doesn't come back in episode 2, then they're waiting too long anyway. Or it's Sauron. And those are the 3 options, because we know that Sauron can shapeshift, so he could have been the wolf, and that could have been our first shot of Sauron. And those are the 3 options in my head.
And by the way, the fact, and just a continuation on why this show sucks, Sauron isn't even supposed to be in Middle Earth right now. So the whole premise of the show is garbage.
No, he is. He is. He's currently what the Tolkien community calls sexy Sauron. So he's just going around, and like in the books, he would take the form of Anatar, I think. Was the name that he used, and he infiltrates Numenor, and and then obviously goes and tricks Celebrimbor into helping him with the Rings of Power and all that stuff. So he is, especially with the accelerated timeline, which is another problem of its own that a lot of people have a problem with.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is.
It completely
he is around.
It completely takes the legs out of why Galadriel is even on this mission and the show is even happening at all.
What
the way that they have screwed the timeline.
Why?
Well, because as I can remember it, first of all, Finrod, like, he didn't go on the hunt for Sauron and get
No,
killed.
they stole that, I think, from Beren and Luthien. I think it's Beren, is it not, that goes?
Yes.
Looking for it? Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's the whole reason why, like, Luthien tried to kill herself and all of that stuff. So Finrod actually, like, he had his own kingdom off, like, in his own, doing his own thing, whatever, was not as involved as they're making him.
Was that Gondolin? Was Finrod the one that set up Gondolin?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And he was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was very uncommon for him being the kind of elf that he was. He had a beard.
Yeah.
And they thought that was really strange because most of them were fair-faced. And so it was really rare. That was another thing that they were like really surprised about with Elrond, was the fact that he didn't end up with any facial hair, considering the fact that his father was human. So yeah, Finrod was off doing his own little thing. Like, he wasn't even anywhere near as involved in the story as they're making him out to be. And so the other thing too was by the point that Sauron and all of the corruption and stuff starts in, Galadriel was already like in the whole Lothlorien part.
I mean, with Galadriel, I will give them a little bit more slack with that, just because Tolkien changed his mind on what happened with Galadriel so many times that we're not actually sure what the official backstory is. Because like, there's versions where she went back to the Undying Lands. There's version where she was banned from it. There was versions where she refused going back, and then so I do.
Well, because as somebody who's read it like all extensively, she did go back and then left and was told, okay, if you leave, you're not going to get to come back here.
Which I don't understand why they didn't do that in the show. She was like right there. Yeah. Why not just have her go back and then be like, you know what, I made a mistake, I'm going back to Middle Earth, and have them be like, no, you're okay, if you go, you're not coming back. I really, rather than having her jump off the ship in the middle of the goddamn ocean.
Yeah, it was so stupid. And like, where the fuck are her psychic powers? Where are they?
See, I am confused by that, because was that not a result of having Narya?
Right, exactly. They're like, okay, we're going to make you strong by making you fucking weak.
Then let me point something out here. This is a through line of the episode that I think is very important to the overall fact that the show is grossly mediocre. In my opinion, they made Galadriel an unlikable bitch. Okay? They really did. We see in the beginning that she is so overzealously pursuing her goal that she completely ignores the counsel of her trusted friends, people she's spent years pursuing this goal with, and she completely ignores them and their counsel outright, to the point that they mutiny against her. And then, at the end of the fucking episode, we have this scene. Excuse me, I need a drink. And then at the end of the episode, we have this scene where, despite that, one of her men reaches out and says, take my hand. Join me in going to this wonderful place. Take my hand and be united with me, your friend, as we go towards heaven, essentially. Mm-hmm. And she turns away and says no. Okay? If they had set Galadriel up as actually being a good commander, if they had set her up as having the loyalty and trust of her people, they could have had this really great scene where they're getting close to the opening of the Undying Isles, and she says, and they could have introduced her psychic powers this way. Mm-hmm. They could have been like, Galadriel could have said, I've had a vision.
Yeah.
And I've seen the great enemy. I've seen Sauron. I know he's here. I've had a vision. Trust me. And she wins back the trust of her people for one last go around for looking for Sauron. And the boat could have turned around, and it would have been this really great triumphant scene where we actually got a solid demonstration that Galadriel was a charismatic, interesting leader, and that she wasn't just strong because she could swing a sword, but she was strong because she had the ability to lead people. Mm-hmm. Okay? One of the ways that a woman can actually be strong. So it would have made for a good female character. Yeah. But instead, she does the dumbest thing you could possibly do, something that only worked because she has the plot armor of $1 billion behind her, and she jumps off a boat in the middle of the fucking ocean. Yeah. It's the dumbest fucking thing you could possibly write.
Okay, so I actually, surprisingly, really agree with you that would have been a really good way of doing it. Like having the boat get that close to Valinor, and then having that almost like being that close to Valinor, sort of like awakening this part of Galadriel where she like gets a glimpse into the Song of Iluvatar, and she's like, she remembers part of it, and she's like, no, Sauron is there, like, and that being like the trigger that, yeah, she accepted it, but then she hears like this snippet of the Song of Iluvatar, and she's like, no, evil isn't gone. Yeah, I actually think that really thematically would have worked incredibly well.
Well, because it would have been more lore consistent.
It's almost like I'm a good writer.
Yeah, no, I'll give you credit where credit's due. However, I do disagree with you in part, because so it's well established that Tolkien said that a defining trait, I'm not sure whether he said it was her worst trait, but a defining trait of Galadriel in her younger years was pride.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time she gets to who she is in Lord of the Rings, she's been on this massive character arc. She did have pride, and she wanted to rule a place of her own and stuff like that. And I do think it's wise in a show like this. We need a through story. And I quite like the idea of the through story of the entire show being getting Galadriel to the contemplative, wise, noble woman who she is in Lord of the Rings, where she can get to the place mentally where Frodo offers her the ring and she refuses.
Mm-hmm.
And I quite like that as a character arc. So although no, I didn't necessarily like who she was being, like that, even that whole like snow section where they're climbing up the rock wall and the guy falls down and she's like, no, we keep going. I like the staunch determination to prove that evil is there, but I do think they could have handled it slightly better too.
Yeah.
Well,
because it was.
Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, because I was going to say, because it's already in the source material, how she is like a staunch, yes, evil is here thing, because, okay, like in Fellowship of the Ring, when she was looking in the mirror and she was talking about like all of the evil and stuff that she was seeing, she kind of like what you mentioned about the, her getting a perception of evil from the Song of Iluvatar or whatever, even though it wasn't specifically that, she already had a sense that corruption was happening, and that's part of her reason why when she went to the Undying Lands, she was like, I have to leave and go back because it's not dead. And they were like, well, if you go, we're not going to let you back here. So
folks, it ain't fire, it ain't dead.
Right. So she was like, okay, you know what? Fuck all of you, because consistent with her character, her pride, she was like, okay, you know what? If none of you are going to do this, best way to take care of the situation is take care of it yourself. So I'm going back there and I'm taking care of it. It was already in the source material. So she did. She went back and, got banned, and then, set up the whole thing in Lothlorien. And this was the whole reason why she ended up marrying Celeborn against what she was being told also, because he was Sylvan. And from what we know in The Hobbit, Sylvan were considered like trash elves, basically. You guys are like low tier. You all,
You're basically humans.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're one tier above I can't remember the name of them, but there's there are the elves as well that have never seen the light of the two trees, which are like the lowest elves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so she went as a big fuck you to everyone, was like, okay, well, you know what? They're all, battle ready people, like they're mercenaries and, all that stuff. So I'm going to marry him because he's basically a warlord, and we're going to take care of this ourselves. And that was the whole reason why Lothlorien and all of that ended up getting set up. So, I mean, the source material was already there for her being that kind of a character, and her already, being like really badass and, headstrong and all of that. They just didn't want to put in the effort to actually develop her as a real character.
Yeah, because imagine if they'd had it so she went back to Valinor, and the next maybe 2 episodes, you build this arc where she's in Valinor and it's all happy and balloons and party poppers, and everyone's having like this really good time, and they're like, "Yay, evil's gone," and it's all good, and you just get this slow. Like every time you see Galadriel, she's sort of having a good time, but she's got like this niggling sort of feeling.
Yeah.
And as the like 2 episodes go on, you've just got like Galadriel just not feeling a part of it and not feeling right and having this niggling little feeling. And then in episode 3, when she's like, you know what? Evil's not gone. I'm going back. And they're all like, no, don't leave. That moment would have actually had some weight. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've swung me on that one, because I wasn't entirely sold on I'm just going to launch myself into the ocean in the middle of nowhere.
And I do want to make another point that's kind of an addendum to everything you guys just said. Pride does not preclude you from being a good leader. In fact, often one of the primary characteristics of good leaders is a certain level of pride. I would cite my writing, Garden of Lies, Amnes.
Available in all good bookstores.
Available in Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and soon to be audiobook, hopefully. But yeah, Amnes is immensely prideful. It's one of her. If you had to like put her personality traits on a tier list of most present, pride is top 3. But
probably same with Amin.
Yeah, but it's so apparent how much she cares about her friends and how dedicated she is to to her loyalty to her pack and maintaining their loyalty to her. Her pack is everything to her. And so you can write a good female character that has immense pride, but it's still a good leader. I've done it.
Well,
not too born, but
I think you could do the opposite as well, though. I mean, again, just going from my point of view, Amin is someone who has an immense amount of pride, and I think I did a decent job of showing how that pride is good intentioned, but doesn't necessarily lead to the best outcomes. Like her pride in Enemies of the Crown is almost the downfall of everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think she still came across as a good character, so. Basically, what we're saying is, either way, you could have done it and done it a bit better. You could have done what you were doing and done it a bit better, or you could have done it this other way and done that equally as good.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, it's there in the source material. If they had just, gone and actually developed Galadriel as a character with all of the good bones that were already there.
Mm-hmm. You have definitely swung me a little bit on this. And actually, now I think about it, what my biggest problem is? Now I think about it. Once again, the dwarves get fucking shortchanged.
Yes.
They don't even get introduced in the first episode. Like, what? You're not going to even show us like a little bit of the dwarves?
Right.
Like, it's just it's this Lord of the Rings fandom, like, fucking favoritism of like, men, elves, dwarves, they're interested. Men, elves, and hobbits, they're interesting. Dwarves, no, they can wait till the second episode.
Right.
No, I don't know if it's even in the second episode because I haven't seen that yet. But the fact that
they are.
Okay. But the fact that they're not in the first episode is ridiculous.
Oh boy. Yeah.
I do, Mason. I'm sorry. I'm gonna bring up something from the second episode. I don't give a fuck. It's not a huge spoiler. It's more It's more of another bitch I have about the directing and screenwriting, okay? If this was in the script, it's moronic. And if it was if it was an interpretation of the script by the director, it's moronic. It's just absolutely fucking terrible and nonsensical. So at Galadriel, there's a storm, and she encounters this raft with a guy, and then there's a storm, and she ends up getting pulled off the raft, and she's tied up, and instead of and you see us, and there's a scene, the camera pans in on this rope swirling off the deck, this bundle of rope disappearing off the deck, and instead of just reaching out and grabbing the rope and pulling Galadriel back up, which would be the easiest thing because she's in water, which makes her even lighter. And people who've seen the scene don't say, well, she was also tied to this and there was also that at the end of the rope. I'm a certified commercial diver. I've pulled heavy things out of the water. Trust me when I tell you, it would have been 10 million times easier to get that rope in your hands and pull her up than it was to dive down there and try to get her out of that rope under the water. I've done knots underwater. I've done salvage work. That dude risked his life and risked losing track of his boat when he could have just grabbed the rope and pulled her up. And it would have been just as dramatic if when we saw the scene of her sinking, if the music had like up-tempoed and she'd sunk below the bottom of the screen's vision, and then the music had gone real low, and then you saw her starting to come up and the music up-tempoed, and then it panned to this guy desperately straining with the rope, pulling her up, and there's lightning in the background, and you see him straining. It would have been just as dramatic and just as triumphant and absolutely not fucking moronic at all.
No, I agree with you. That does sound better.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny just to go back to like a point earlier with like the whole diversity thing.
Mhm.
It's interesting with you saying about like changing the master's work, because I think that comes down to like a personal taste thing on behalf of the author. So obviously Tolkien's not around to comment on this, but it's interesting because when I think of like say the Bleeding Ground, if I think of if that was ever made into, I don't know, a TV show or something, I would be perfectly willing. I would just want whoever was best for the role. Like if someone come along and they were like, I don't care what race they were, man. If they came in and they delivered lines as Evander, Amin, Veldus, Arya, despite what I've done for their descriptions, if someone come in and they just did this audition, I was like, yeah, that's Veldus right there.
Right, yeah.
Okay, but that's valid. That's valid as your choice as the author. Tolkien isn't here to say, you know what, yeah, I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
He said they're a fair-skinned race. That's why it's a pet peeve.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you, by the way. I thought of that independently too, as if they'd have just solved it by just having him be mixed race.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't think of a better word for that. But yeah, if he'd have been half human, that would have made a lot more sense. And it probably would have done away with the whole fucking argument in the first place.
Yeah, and it would have, plus it would have been lore consistent for there to be contention, and it would have, been ready-made setup conflict. They could have, plus the fact that he's, a new character, like he's not even a part of anything.
Yeah.
Kind of like Eleanor is, or Nori is a new character. So, I mean, they could have just done that instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that I came in thinking it was fairly average, and now I'm probably on the side of I think it could have been a lot better.
It could have, yeah.
There's so many just little quality of life improvements they could have made. So many small adjustments they could have made, and the whole thing would have been better. Also, Mason, call Soy Boy an asshole because he's in chat being an absolute obnoxious prick.
Yeah.
Soy Boy, get the fuck out of here. And don't come back.
Or the process. Lose one of my rounds. Go around and never come back. Oh man. Oh man, I don't want to spoil it.
No, you can. Don't worry. It's fine.
Okay. Well, they missed an opportunity here. They really did. Missed an opportunity with the dwarves. The female dwarves don't have facial hair.
I mean, that's just a throwaway line that Gimli gives away, but
it's lore. like it's accurate.
Yeah.
They were bearded ladies. Where are they?
Where did they go? Probably the same place the Entwives went.
Yeah, it's like, why do all of the female dwarves not have facial hair? I mean, if they wanted to tick a diversity box, it was right there.
It really was.
I
That was
actually,
a free win.
I actually had my eyes opened a little bit on this diversity thing the other day, right? Because obviously, as you know, I get a bit defensive about it because as a disabled person, I tend to think diversity equals good thing because, you know, just people, people being represented. But I was listening to Chaz and Friends by a guy on BookTube called Bookish Chaz. And he was talking to Josephine from Fine Reads, and she talked about how the difference between diversity and inclusion, and that really opened my eyes, actually. Metaphorically speaking, because she basically, like, to boil it down, one of the things she mentioned was, like, say if you hire someone and you hire them under diversity reasons, you put them in the company and you force them to try and work like everyone else. And you've done that because you're trying to meet diversity quotas, right, as opposed to if you hire them and then you proceed to actually change how things work and try to. So take, for example, if you hired me and then you tried to make me work like everyone else, as opposed to hiring me and then providing me with accessibility software,
right,
for the, to help me do my work. That's the difference between diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And it really opened my eyes, and I was like, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So like the Arondir thing, like having a black elf perhaps falls under diversity rather than inclusion.
Yeah, because it's shoehorning the thing in for the sake of the thing instead of actually including it in a way that's meaningful.
I think that's the first time I've seen it like that, though. Like, it genuinely changed my perspective. Yeah.
I wish I would have thought of explaining it that way. That there is some merit to that explanation. I think there's some key things that leaves out, and the thing that I don't like about explaining it that way is, in my opinion, it fails to address the point at all that it doesn't matter if someone is black or white or Chinese or they can see or they have one arm. None of that really matters. Can they fulfill the role that needs to be fulfilled? It's all good and well to include someone, but are they actually capable of doing the job with or without help? If someone is going to be really good at this job, if you just do this one thing to make it possible for them to do the job, that's reasonable. But over here in the US, just as an example, we have a huge problem with diversity quotas lowering the quality of work that's actually getting done. Our government is a perfect example of this right now. Our Federal Reserve is in the shitter. Our inflation is skyrocketing, but it's the most diverse Federal Reserve ever.
See, over here, though, we're on the opposite side of things, where because they don't make those efforts to make those little tweaks to make it easier for people, like unemployment in the disabled community over here is massive. Like, it's like I don't have the specific data, but it's a large percentage of disabled people have no employment.
Yeah, and see that is probably one thing we do a little better over here because we have the Americans with Disability Act, things like wheelchair ramps, things like Braille being on all necessary public signage. There's Braille, so like bathrooms and that kind of stuff that has a Braille section, because we recognize that, okay, like Stephen Hawking's a perfect example. He was a massive contribution to society, but looking at him, you would think this guy's just going to be dead weight for the rest of his life, but gave him the ability to speak. And we got all of this amazing scientific theory that a lot of it has been amazingly useful in developing practical technology.
Mhm.
And we never would have had that if we hadn't gone the extra mile to help him be part of society.
Yeah.
I'm actually really surprised that you had a problem with Galadriel on like with the reasons that you stated, just
Mhm.
because going back to like sort of what you were saying the other day with like if evil is out there and you're not standing up against it, then you are evil too.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't sort of like Galadriel's determination in terms of everyone else is being so complacent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all the elves are being so complacent. Like, yeah, it's done. Evil's gone completely. And Galadriel's the only one that's like, no, it's not. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to prove to you that it's not.
Well, because they presented it in such a way that she was just doing all of these things for the sake of just being hard-headed, rather than setting up that there was actually any kind of real conviction other than her trying to prove herself to be a strong woman.
Right. And here's the thing too, haste makes waste. Okay. I am absolutely someone who is I am 100% on board with hunting down and extinguishing evil by any fucking means necessary in fantasy, in real life, in every fucking aspect of reality. Evil's gotta fucking go. I can't fucking stand it. But here's the thing. If you let your drive to destroy evil hurt the people who are trying to help you, who are on your side, it's a very short road before you're becoming the thing you hate. And I've seen that in my own life.
Which would be okay if that's where they were going with Galadriel, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I see your point there, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm willing to listen.
Because it's like there's so much really good character development there that could have, that in the written material, like, made for really good character arcs. Like, I was really hoping that they would go for the whole, like, actually bringing Celeborn in to the whole, dynamic and everything, instead of this throwaway human character.
If that turns out to be Sauron, though, that might actually be a decent, like, if that's the guy that is going to be like infiltrating Numenor and he's secretly Sauron, then that's actually not a bad character thing. Like, she's like she's
but
so thingy about there being evil, but then doesn't see it when it plops down right in front of her. Don't make noises over me,
oh no, the
child.
thing is, well, well, I was just saying, my thing is, I've seen like previews of what's going on later on, because they already show like how his character is going to progress already. And it's like, no, like, this is not going to be like, why are you setting this up to be the predictable tropey? Oh, there's going to be, some minor sexual tension here. Even though, like, there was already a whole ass love story in there that could have used. Like,
yeah, only one set of people are allowed to fall in love in a story. I agree.
It's like, it's like, you could have given us the whole, like, Celeborn's a sylvan sexy warlord, and like,
I think he'll be in it eventually.
Oh, that, like, they could have brought all of that in and whatever, but like, as part of her whole entire reason for going back to Middle Earth and running into him and being actually rebellious and being able to give the big fuck you to everybody and be like, hey, look, all of this stuff that I told you was going to happen happened. And it didn't turn out as bad as it was going to, because guess why? I went out here and stopped stuff from happening by doing all of the things that I did. But, like I said, it would require them to actually read.
That bit where the elves did the mutiny, I was like, that elf was like, no, we're not. And I was like, screw you, Galadriel, and Gingham.
Right?
Hey, Galadriel, we're gonna respect my 30, Galadriel.
My authority. Gosh.
I was interested in the Tirharad stuff though. I was like, okay, cow with black milk, interesting. The village has been burnt down, interesting. Found a mysterious black sword, interesting. Like, there's enough there that I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued to see where this is going. But there is a lot of stuff, as we've unpacked in great detail, that I'm like, yeah, that probably could be better.
Yeah, because it's like, oh man, had it not been so rushed off, like just like so much setup and foreshadowing that I could have done, and it would have been way better.
I can't even disagree with you on it.
Yep.
And I'm not going to force myself to, just so I can be on the side of like, oh, it's all right.
Well, it's like, why do your hands have to be so ham this way? I don't understand.
I don't
I'm
understand.
trying to do a good job, but my hands, they're just made of hams.
They're just so hammy. So imagine that in a battle rap, if you just like the guy just gets out like two hocks of ham and like holds it out to his opponent, and he's like, I got these out as a metaphor to show that your balls are ham-fisted.
I love it.
I'm holding these hams. They're just like your rhymes.
Oh my god.
I'm holding these hams. Don't get it twisted. It's not because I'm hungry. It's because your lines are ham-fisted.
I love it. Woo-hoo! That was beautiful. Oh. Yeah.
Man, we got to do Bars Police again. I think we'll do Bars Police next week, or we'll do
because
some
it takes a long time.
On Wednesday.
to do Wednesday, yeah, because I just enjoy that so much.
Yes. Yep.
We sit here and we do fucking little raps and modify lines, and Mason gets to be my hype man. I just love it so much. Got to find another online personality who does at least like can rap for us to do a rap battle, man. I think that would be so fucking cool to do a rap battle on stream.
Yeah.
Let's just pants me, why don't we?
Wait, what do you mean just pants you?
Just so let's just expose how shit I am.
No, because you would just be there to be my hype man.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And I can do that.
Yeah.
If you catch me on a day when I can be bothered.
Oh my god. It's like, yeah. You gotta be to translate the bars.
I would actually it's better, it's almost better when you can't be bothered, because then you're just like so bland about it. You're just like, yeah, he's like, fuck you.
Right? He's like,
he said you got a big face.
Like, what does that even mean?
I would call you Mr. Ed, but I know that's not your name. But regardless of that, your face is so long, it drives me insane.
He's saying that you've got a big face and it's also miserable. Like if they were doing a documentary about it, I'd come on screen and in the bottom it'd be like Mason in the dark, Bars translator.
And I could just picture you're just like, yeah, so I'm there in the rap battles and I just kind of explain what Zack is saying, Not because his bars are so complex but that they can't really be understood without me, but just because explaining them kind of just sort of adds to the joke. Like we're insulting his opponent further because, he's so stupid that he can't understand Zack really, like, pretty basic bars. It adds to the insult factor. And I'm just over here like, yeah, that's my boy!
I just feel that it adds insult to injury when Zack delivers these relatively simple bars, and I imply that the opponent can't understand them.
Yes.
Yeah. I do occasionally get a complex bar in, though.
I know,
It's-
but that's also part of the joke. Because then
Right.
occasionally he'd pull out a complex one, and I'd just look at the crowd and shrug.
You're like, yeah, I don't get that one, guys. That's above my pay grade.
I'm like the Wile E. Coyote. I just like look at the audience, shrug, get out a sign that's like, I don't understand this either.
Yeah.
I love that visual of Mason just pulling a massive sign out of his back pocket.
Yeah, but part of the joke is that I reach for it and I reach for the wrong pocket and have to go for the other one afterwards. Or I've left it like propped against the wall and I can't find it. The crowd has to be like, warmer, warmer. Hey! And I finally pick it up.
Oh gosh.
My opponent over here is feeling around in the dark like my hype man, looking for his prop. But you aren't going to need to look very hard for these bars that I'm about to drop. They're going to land straight on you like an anvil from the sky, and there won't be any cartoon physics here. You're just going to die.
Are you saying that his bars have intellectual weight to them and that they're so heavy they'll crush you underneath them?
Ah.
That was actually some heat I just brought, though. Like, that was pretty good.
Yeah. I was just out of interest.
Broke my own shaft a little bit.
Just out of interest the other day, because I was talking to Lee about like how far I've come as a content creator. I actually went and watched one of my first videos the other day from the other channel, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, I love. Also, I just have to point out, bro. Did you think about the name Wrestling in the Dark at all before you called your channel that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the innuendo there is 100% purposeful.
Okay. Because context is pussy.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. This has been Team Adventurous. Thank you so much for being here. Clips from this stream are going to be on the Adventurous Publications YouTube and the IYFA YouTube, both of which you can find on the link tree. You can find my boy Mason at YouTube, Mason in the Dark. Please check him out if you want to laugh or hear some damn good stories, or if you just like books, because he does booktube content too. Yes. We have a Kickstarter going on for Kate's novel. We're doing a shirt right now for Suicide Awareness Month. We're going to donate the end of the month proceeds from that shirt to a charity, which also we're looking for a good charity. So comment on one of the YouTube videos or message us in Discord, whatever, to shout out your charity that you think is worthy of that donation and buy a shirt so we have something to donate. And we'll catch you guys next time. Love you all. Welcome to the adventure.
The adventure.
Welcome to the adventure.
Dun, 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 dun.